Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. I want to start with school. Classes for most Canadian children start next week, and anxiety has really been ramping up over the past couple of weeks in anticipation. As a parent, how do you feel about it? Are you sending your kids back to class?
My kids are going back to class, but as every parent, we've been looking carefully about what the plans are, what the safety measures are in place, and we're going to keep watching closely to make sure that our kids are safe. I've heard from parents right across the country who've been worried about that, and through my virtual tour of BC today and in the many meetings I've had, we've talked a lot about back to school. I had a good conversation with Premier Horgan, and obviously the $242 million we're sending to BC to help with back to school is going towards making sure that kids right across BC and right across the country are going to be safe, because that needs to be our priority.
So there's a lot of debate here in BC, Prime Minister, about how that $242 million should be spent. Should it be on PPE? Should it be on more teachers to reduce class sizes? Again, as a parent, what makes you feel more comfortable? Would it be smaller class sizes? Would it be more PPE? Bigger physical distancing?
Well, I am very aware of provincial areas of jurisdiction. Even though I'm a former teacher, a former member of the BCTF, I'm not going to weigh in on the best way in BC to keep kids safe. I'm going to trust the provinces and the school boards and the parents involved to do what's necessary. What we wanted to do as a government is make sure that every province had those extra resources on top of the plans that they'd already had, so that they could really do everything necessary to keep our kids safe, whatever they judge that to be.
Prime Minister, as you know, tourism is a huge driver of BC's economy, which has been crippled, brought to its knees by COVID. We're at the end of the summer now, which would normally, be a huge time for the tourism sector. We've seen iconic attractions like the Vancouver Aquarium announcing an indefinite closure. The PNE is on the brink. Small businesses across this province are hurting. What is your government going to do to save these pillars of the tourism sector, like the PNE, like the aquarium, and all those small businesses?
Well, first of all, we recognize that this pandemic has hit so many Canadians so hard at home and in their businesses. That's why up as a government with unprecedented investments to make sure that families could stay home, that people could stay home from work, so we get this pandemic under control back in the spring. Now, as we've been through the summer, we're looking at better ways to get our economy going again. We recognize that tourism and certain sectors are still going to struggle, but we need to keep looking at how we're going to make sure that people make it through this difficult time into a brighter future, and that's what we're working with partners from municipalities to provinces to business groups to innovators to make sure that we're doing. And we're just going to keep working in solving these unprecedented problems alongside Canadians and business owners.
Places, the PNE, we've heard from them that they are not eligible for any of the programs that Ottawa has been delivering. They were not eligible for the wage subsidy. How can you save, an iconic attraction like that fair, which I'm sure you've been to when you were here in BC?
I've been to many times and have great memories both as a kid and when I was a little too old for that magic mouse. But we all know that this is a difficult time. We have been there to support businesses with the wage subsidy. Now, the PNE is actually a municipal installation, and therefore, you're right, wasn't eligible for the wage subsidy. But when we turned around with the Safe Restart Agreement with the provinces, we moved forward on giving money directly to the provinces for the municipalities to help them with their priorities. So if these are priorities for the municipalities, there's federal money for that. We want to be part of the solution, but obviously there are a lot of different organizations and Canadians hurting across the country, and we have to try and be there as best as we can in a fair way.
Tourism in Canada obviously depends on American visitors. How long are you willing to keep that U.S.-Canada border closed?
Unfortunately, because I know how much American tourist dollars matter to the BC economy, to people across the country, but I think all Canadians understand that we have to put the health and safety of Canadians first. We were able to sign a landmark agreement that allows the flow of essential goods and services, of necessarily food and medical supplies across this super important border for us, but keeping Canadians safe from the challenges they're facing with COVID south of the border means being strong on our border restrictions, and we're going to keep those in place as long as we need to keep Canadians healthy and safe.
Prime Minister, I want to talk about the overdose crisis in BC. It's been a public health emergency in this province for far longer than COVID. It's claimed many, many more lives than COVID has. We've heard from Dr. Bonnie Henry, Premier John Horgan, the Canadian Association of Police Chiefs, that it's time for decriminalization. Do you agree? Is it time to decriminalize possession of small amounts of hard drugs?
The opioid epidemic has been a tragedy, an ongoing national tragedy for many, many years now. And it's something that, as a government, we've moved forward on many different measures to address, whether it's increasing safe consumption sites, moving forward with safe supply measures, working to support frontline workers, doing work around mental health and addictions, working with homelessness and creating housing. These are things that are all part of it. As you will have seen, the Public Prosecution Service of Canada has moved forward with new orders that doesn't involve prosecuting for small amounts of personal possession. I think this is an ongoing conversation, but there is no one silver bullet that's going to fix this tremendous challenge. And I had a good conversation with Premier Horgan just a few minutes ago about continuing to work together on a broad range of things that are going to be helpful on this.
If you're willing to hold off on the prosecution of possession for small amounts, why not take it a step further and go to decriminalization? Each day the conversation continues. 5 people die in BC.
But the challenge that we're facing is decriminalization is one option amongst many that could possibly make a difference, but there are many different things that are going into it. COVID has people more isolated, and therefore they're using alone, and therefore there aren't people around to help them if they overdose. There's also challenges around the borders, so people are having to use worse quality stuff that they find in the streets in order that puts them at risk as well. This is a tragedy that affects people in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, but it also is a tragedy that affects middle-class families across BC, across the country. And we need to take a much more complex and a much more multifaceted approach, which we have been on doing it. And I understand people are looking for a silver bullet. There isn't one. We're going to continue working closely with experts, with different orders of government, and we're going to continue fighting this epidemic a priority, even as we tackle the other crisis of COVID.
Dr. Henry, Dr. Tam, all these health professionals agree it's not one silver bullet for this crisis, but it is an important part in their opinion. You listen to the advice of your health officials in Canada on the COVID crisis. What about on the opioid crisis?
We have been listening to public health officials from the very beginning, which is why we have moved forward on opening more safe consumption sites, which is why we are allowing for safe supply, giving more powers to doctors to prescribe alternatives that will be safer for people. We're moving forward on investments in housing, investments on frontline services. We've been there to ensure that we're doing everything we can, and we're going to continue having conversations about the right path forward. There's lots of different approaches, and we're going to listen and take a look at a broad range of them.
Prime Minister, you've been having virtual meetings today with business leaders in BC about the green recovery. What specifics were discussed in these meetings, and how will this green recovery help businesses recover from the COVID crisis?
Well, I think one of the things, when we talk about a green recovery, what we're actually talking about is a long-term recovery for our economy. We know the world is going towards greater energy efficiency. We know the world is going towards lower carbon. We know the world is moving towards more renewable energy. This is the way the world is going, and we need to make sure that we're leading the way, that we're part of that in a way that reassures people in existing industries, people who have jobs now or are worried about their jobs because of COVID or have lost their jobs because of COVID, that our plan for the future of the economy includes them. So yes, there's an awful lot we can and must be doing around improving our economy in many different ways, including in real steps towards fighting this other crisis that we're facing on top of COVID and the opioid crisis, which is the climate change crisis. As we move forward in reimagining what the Canadian economy can look like in the coming years, we have an opportunity to go greener. We have an opportunity to be fairer, to reduce barriers for women's participation, for Indigenous participation in the workforce. There are so many things that we can look at as an opportunity through this tragedy of COVID to do bigger things. But that's why we're putting together a throne speech now that will set out this ambitious agenda before Parliament, and parliamentarians can decide, because we're in a minority situation, whether this government has the support to move forward on this new agenda that, quite frankly, nobody ran an election on a year ago because we didn't know about COVID. This was a completely different situation, and laying that out, which includes an ambitious green agenda, is going to be what we're doing at the end of this month.
All right. We look forward to hearing that throne speech. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, thanks for your time today.
It's great to be back in BC, if only virtually.
Thank you.